Hello and welcome to another episode of Socratic Satsang. We're thrilled to welcome Amber Hollingsworth to the show today. Amber is a licensed mental health counselor and licensed addiction counselor who's been working in the field for over 20 years. She's also the powerhouse behind the hit podcast and YouTube channel, Put the Shovel Down, where hundreds of thousands tune in for her practical advice and encouragement. Amber's passion is helping families break through to their loved ones who are in denial about addiction. She does this through her signature method, the invisible intervention, a compassionate, connection-first approach that stands in contrast to the old tough love mindset. With decades of expertise, Amber brings hope, clarity, and a fresh perspective for anyone feeling stuck. If you've ever struggled to reach a loved one, Amber has the tools and insights to help. Welcome, Amber.
Well, hey, thanks. Powerhouse. I haven't ever been called. Wait till my husband gets home. I'll tell him I'm a powerhouse. Make sure he knows it.
Oh, we're excited to get started.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
You have a very impressive profile and body of work. Definitely impressive.
Thank you.
You've walked alongside countless families through addiction. If a family listening right now feels scared and exhausted, what's the very first thing you'd want them to hear from you?
I want them to know that they're not powerless. And even if they've been told that there's nothing they can do and that they just have to step back and cross their fingers and hope someone figures it out, that they actually have a lot more influence than they might think.
So, how do you conceptualize addiction?
That's a big one. It's like, what's the answer to the universe? let me wrap my head around. Sometimes I use the word disease, but in actuality, I don't really feel like it is a disease. But I kind of say it because it is good for stigma reasons. So the reason that a lot of people sort of go with that route is because it does reduce stigma, and there are brain changes that occur. But the thing of it is that addiction has actually been happening for a long time before those brain changes take place. You actually have to be addicted long before you're dependent. And when most people think about addiction, what they think of is dependency, as in like, I have to drink first thing when I wake up, or I'm doing it every day, or I go into withdrawal. But in order to get to a dependent state, you have to have been using very consistently over a long period of time, which indicates addiction long before dependency. So I think of it probably a lot more broadly than most people think of it. And I don't really see it as a malfunction of the brain because it's doing what it's designed to do.
Wow. How does addiction get started? I mean, what are the stages before you turn into an addict? And is there anything you can do to cut it off, nip it at the bud?
I'm glad you phrase it that way, as in stages, because that really is the way that I see the whole issue, is that it happens in stages. And one of my big goals is help people see it in some of the earlier stages, because the earlier you catch it, the easier it is to turn the boat around. I think probably where it needs to be called is what I would call stage 3. And I see it in 4 stages. Stage 4 would be like dependency, like I can't stop even if I wanted to. Stage 3 is more like, not even like someone has to do it every day, but more like they have a hard time stopping once they start. If you find that you break a lot of your own promises to yourself, like you tell yourself, I'm just going to go and drink this amount or do this, or I'm not going to spend more than this money, and you fairly regularly go over those limits and then do things you regret, and then you kind of get caught in that cycle of making promises to yourself again and doing okay, then breaking the limits. If you're caught in that cycle, that's a good indicator that you are in the phases of addiction.
Do you have something like a 4 or 5-point checklist that someone can look at and say, okay, if 1, 2, 3, if I take these 3, then I am an addict? Or because I know many people who say, I do a lot of, let's say, alcohol or smoking, but I'm not an addict. So how do you know the difference?
When I'm working with a client, I try to resist the temptation to tell them if they are or they aren't. What I like to do is I just like to go old school and break out the big DSM and go over the 11 criteria. And I'll say, and I have a video outlining all this if anybody wants to go through it, but I'll say, I'm just going to read them out of the book to you so they don't feel like I'm judging them or deciding. Literally, I'm going to read you these 11 criteria, and I want you to count on your fingers or in your head as I go. And then when we get done, you tell me how many of them you have. And then based on what you calculate, I'll tell you what this thing says. Because basically the DSM puts it into mild, moderate, severe. And so as I walk through, and sometimes I'll read them the criteria and then give them an example. Sometimes the lingo is a little clinical. And so I'll say, that's like this or this or this, and then let them diagnose themselves.
That's really useful. Is it on your website, these 11 criteria?
Yeah, you can actually, on our website, you can download the 11 criteria, like the checklist for free. You can go on YouTube and watch the video where I actually read them out and explain each one. But I find it helpful to let someone else come to the conclusion.
Well, what is your website?
It's familyrecoveryacademy.online.
Thank you.
So, a big piece of your work is helping families who have loved ones who are in denial about addiction. And part of your process is helping them reach out and come to the realization themselves that something is going wrong. What are some early steps that families can take in order to begin that process?
The process that we use, we call it the invisible intervention because it's an intervention, but not like you see on TV, because it's invisible, like they don't even know it happened. It's behind the scenes, some ways you're gonna like lead them to it. And the very first and most important step, if you do nothing else, if you do this step, you've already sped up the process, which is to get out of the bad guy role. I call it the bad guy role. What happens when someone has an addiction is they need a villain in the story, because addiction just doesn't work very well if you don't have a villain, because addiction is fueled by resentment and self-pity. So in order to have resentment and self-pity, there's got to be a villain in the story. And it is usually the person closest to you in the family, like your partner or your parent, usually. And it's the person that actually sees the problem first and then starts to try to make you see it. They become the villain. They become the problem. And that actually blocks the person from being able to see what the real problem is. Most of the people that come to my office over the years, they come in because someone in their life leveraged them to do it. And when I'm talking to them about the problem, it's quite clear that they see this other person as the problem. And so that's the first roadblock that absolutely has to be removed.
Wow. So, what are the steps to beginning to remove that roadblock with a person? How do you help them see that that's the roadblock to recovery?
Well, for the loved one, it's about reversing your approach. And maybe not everyone does it this way, but it's kind of instinctual. And most people, when you see your loved one is, running out in front of a train is what it feels like. They're like destroying themselves and you at the same time. Naturally, you get fearful. And what families are designed to do is protect each other. So it's a very natural instinct to want to run in there and say, hold up, you're headed to danger. Stop, stop. But the way I visualize it is almost like the family members on the in front of the train tracks, like screaming and waving and doing all this crazy stuff, saying, stop, 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 danger. And all the addicted person sees is a crazy person standing in their way. And if you would just step back, they might see that big cliff that they're headed towards with all those spikes and scary monsters underneath. But you're blocking the viewpoint. So in order to reverse strategy, what most families do is they go around and they fix all the messes that the addiction is causing. They call the teacher and they ask for extra credit. They call the boss and make an excuse. They pay for the lawyer. They do all the things to fix the outside problems, but inside the context of the relationship, they're mad at the person. They're grumping at them. They're trying to control them. They're trying to tell them they're messing up, which is perceived as being controlled and being criticized by the addicted person. And you want to reverse that. You want to let the world be the bad guy and you be the good guy. So the world's consequences, the ones that don't come from you, that's really important. The ones that come from anywhere else, so that they start to see what the real problem is.
Wow.
That was deep and super, super powerful. When someone's blaming a family member or a spouse, there must be some real grounds also for the blame, right? And then how do you break that?
I think that's a good point. There are some valid reasons. And the valid reason is that your partner is acting like a crazy person. And they are. They've become crazy, but what you don't realize is they're crazy because of what you're doing. So there's some sort of symptomatic, crazy type behaviors that you can almost count on that your partner's going to start doing, like um, nagging you all the time, like counting and watching how much you're using and spying on you and tracking you on the tracker and all the things. They just become, I call it like the FBI syndrome. I mean, they get good. Like, I think they have black lights in their purses. Like they're on it. And that, and it's like, and then you see them as constantly negative, and I always think the worst thing's going to happen, and they just want to control you, and they don't see anything you do right. These are all the complaints that I hear on my end from the addicted person. And the truth of it is that it is all happening. It's not in their imagination. The part they don't want to acknowledge is that is very symptomatic behavior of a partner or a parent or someone who is dealing with someone who's addicted. Like, you can predictively count on certain behaviors.
In my work as a coach, I have come across some people who are extremely ambitious career wise. And one of the mistakes they make, because they follow the systematic steps and they put their goals clearly and they work towards their goals. And a mistake I've seen people do is that when they set their goals, they haven't set their values. So sometimes to achieve those goals, there are opportunities that are present in front of them. And those opportunities means letting go of their values. So they don't realize it. They take those opportunities, they keep succeeding, but deep within it starts eating into them. The success doesn't bring them joy, but they slowly start leaning towards alcohol, towards any kind of escapism. And then before you know it, they're in some kind of addiction. Have you come across something like that? And what's your advice for such people?
That's sort of my specialty these days. I call it businessmen who drink too much. That's my best thing right there. That's my niche. Because those same qualities that make you a very ambitious person are the same ones that drive addiction. And so it's exactly what you're talking about. It's that like inability to turn it off. And then you feel like, what's wrong with me because I can't just sit down and be present with my family. And it's weird because you're just like thinking all the time and strategizing, and people are upset with you and they're saying you're a workaholic. So you're trying to relax and be present, and you might start leaning on alcohol or something else. Or
Yeah.
you feel like deep down inside, you feel like I just don't really enjoy social events, but I need to be social. But in my head, I'm thinking, I really want to be doing this and this. So you're trying to turn yourself into someone that you're not. And you start using substances to do that.
Have you found loneliness as a big cause for addictions?
It's definitely part of the equation. Whether it's what gets it started, I don't know, but it ends up there because addiction makes you feel completely lonely and isolated. Even if you're surrounded by everyone you love, you have this whole secret life going on, so no one really knows you. So even if you're with the people who love you the most, you don't feel connected to them because it just feels like a mask all the time, and it's sort of fake. All of your relationships get there at some. It's very lonely.
Wow. We just did an interview with this equally impressive person. As you know, I'm autistic. So one of the resources I used on when I had gone through a crash was this podcast called The Aspie World. And we just did an interview with Daniel Jones of The Aspie World. And he mentioned that many high functioning autistics and others with neurodivergence turn into addicts, and many of them die between 35 to 50. And one of the leading causes for dying between 35 to 50 is addictions, loneliness, and suicide. Have you come across a lot of this?
Addiction, as far as addictions, loneliness, and suicide part, yeah, definitely, for sure. I feel like that's when you start. Depends on when you start in an addiction, sort of how fast it progresses on you. Some people start early, like in their early 20s or teens. Then I see other people who functioned really well for a really long time, and the addiction part doesn't take over until they're in their midlife or even later life. And so, but once that happens, then you move. Once the addiction comes, all the other little pieces come with it.
What are some of the common traits that you see amongst people who end up having an addiction?
I think addiction can happen to all types of people, um, but once they have it, it looks the same. So it's sort of like no matter who you are, once you have an addiction, there's very predictable things you're gonna think and things you're gonna do, that if you came and you told me, "I've got this person and they have this addiction and here's where they're at in the stages of change," I can almost tell you what they're gonna do tomorrow and the next day and the next day. And that's what's so interesting about it is because addiction is very predictable, which is actually really good news because once you understand the rules of this universe, you can get ahead of it. You can get strategy on it. You just got to come to terms with what you're dealing with. Now, the uniqueness of people will help you once you understand a person individually and uniquely, you can use that to help them pull them out of it. So it's sort of like the addiction story is always the same, but the recovery story is always different.
Absolutely. What when you're talking about kind of being able to predict those different pieces, what is the kind of common trend in the addiction story?
The place it starts is kinda like I was talking about in stage 3, which is like, I do something that I regret. Maybe that's, I get intoxicated and I text my ex things I wished I didn't, or I spent a bunch of money on pain pills and now my wife is wondering where that money went to. You go too far, you promise yourself you're gonna do better, you may do better for a little while, and then you mess up, and then you get in this shame cycle. And then you start progressively, as more people start to catch on and get on to you, then you start to hide it more and more. And once you start hiding it, it just escalates the whole process. And you have this secret life going on. If you could see what someone with an addiction is doing inside their head, they on the outside they're trying to pretend they're like going through life. They're doing all the things, they're having conversations, but inside their head it is 24/7. It's planning, scheming. It's like the way I visualize it's like someone at the circus that's standing on a ball, juggling knives, balancing a plate on their nose. That's what it's like inside because they're trying to play this outside game, go to work, get the kids from soccer, do all the things. But inside, it's like, how much do I have? How am I going to have enough? How am I going to act like I'm not intoxicated? How am I going to get the money without my partner knowing? Where am I going to put the evidence and paraphernalia? And it never ends. It's constant going on and on and on and on. And it's terrible inside of there. You may think, oh, this person's just about like partying and having fun, but that's not what it's like to be addicted. It's like being held hostage, being stuck, chained on a treadmill, and you can't stop running.
Yeah. Yeah. What are some of the subtle signs of a person making progress on recovery, even if maybe it's not noticeable success, quote unquote, as of yet?
Yeah. No, some of the first signs is you look for what I call change talk. That's like the clinical term for it. And you might hear someone saying, I'm doing this a little too much, or I need to cut back, or they start to make these little promises and wheels and deals with themselves or with you. Well, I'll only do that on the weekends, or I won't drink more than 3, or whatever that is. And you may be frustrated because you may think, well, you're not taking it serious. You've said that before. But actually, when someone is saying those things and they're trying those things, even though it may not work, that's an effort. It's a learning process. And that means they're in their process of change and they're in the trial and error. And so instead of seeing that and being frustrated with, oh my gosh, here we go again, if you could realize that that actually is a good sign and that you can take that momentum and build on it, you'll react to it a lot differently. Like when someone says to me, I'm going to cut it back and I'm just going to drink no more than 3 times a week and I'm not going to have more than 3 beers or glasses of wine. I may know in my head that is never going to work. But the way I react to that is I say, I think that's completely reasonable. Like that would be a huge improvement. Let's do it. Let's put that on your treatment plan. and let's see how it works. If it doesn't work, we'll back up, we'll get another plan. And so I'm saying let's try that, but I'm also leaving the door open that it might not work. And if it doesn't, that's cool. We'll figure out another plan. And I also will plant a seed in their head. I'll say something like, a lot of my people end up figuring out that, well, some of my people figure out that they can't really do that, that they sort of keep falling through the cracks. And then others of them, they can do it, but it's really hard. And they end up deciding that it takes so much time and energy to keep it under control and it's not really worth it. But we'll try yours and we'll just like check in and see how you're feeling with that as it goes along. And that way you're taking that, what the family might see as um, like an insincere effort or something like that. And you're actually helping move that faster. You can't skip those stages, but you can speed them up by doing things like.
So, and is that how you would, that's how you encourage the families to approach, with clients? Because I imagine it does feel exhausting for families to go through that time and time again. Um, how do you encourage families to maintain hope through that process of trying and relapsing?
When you shift your lens on it, you feel completely different. Like, for example, when your husband comes home and he says the bargain of, okay, I got it. I missed the ball game or I didn't do the thing. I'm not going to do that anymore. I'm just going to drink on the weekend. And then you say, okay. And then it's Thursday that comes around the next week and you see that they went to the store and bought alcohol. I don't want you to try to keep them to their limit, because what we're trying to do here is we're trying to get them to see that they can't stick to their limit. So instead of getting frustrated when you see that, you need to be thinking in your head, wait, check, because what you really want is you want it to happen faster. And what most family members do is they try to slow it down. Well, remember you said you were only going to, and then they try to stop them. I'm like, that's slowing us down. So it's like when you see we need these failures to happen so that we can get to the end goal, then you don't feel as hopeless when that happens and you view it as actual progress. And that keeps you in a more hopeful frame of mind, and it keeps us moving forward to the goal line, which for most family members is sobriety.
Yeah. Do you find the same approach works for adults as it would for adolescents? I mean, the parent approach to a kid versus partner approach to husband, wife, or so forth.
The same approach works towards people of any age, and it works towards people of any problem. So it doesn't even have to be addiction. If it's your best friend and they're in a toxic relationship, they're going to go back to that person a few times. They're going to bargain. They're going to do all the same things, And if you can understand what's happening, you interact with them this way, you can help anyone move through stages of change through whatever it is that they're trying to change much more effectively. Now, I will say if your child is underage, there may be some boundaries that you can't quite let go of the same way you could with an adult, even though philosophically I would still encourage you to do that. But there are some lines you have to draw in the sand when you're dealing with a minor.
Yeah. Can you share a story about when the approach of the invisible intervention has been useful?
What's really cool for me these days is that these days when people call my office and they're the person who has the addiction, I can tell whether or not their family has done the invisible intervention by what they say on their application, what they say on the first phone call. I know that it's working when someone calls me and I say, well, how did you find me? And they say, well, my wife found you. She wanted me to see you. She made me watch your videos. And I thought, yeah, that's kind of cool. And I said, well, why do you want to change it? And they'll say, you know what? My wife has just put up with me. I can't believe it. I can't believe she's still stuck by me. I got to stop doing this. This is ridiculous. I'm messing up my life. Like they come in completely insightful and ready to hit the ground running. They're like, tell me what to do to fix this. They're like in that action stage of change. And I can literally imagine exactly what's happened leading up to that because I know that their partner has, I'm like, in my head, I'm like, feeling so happy for the family member because I'm like, oh, you did this. You set this stage so perfect. Because for all the years of my career, that's not the case. Usually when I'm starting with a person, I'm literally starting with them like sullen, they're mad. Sometimes they've gotten tricked into seeing me, like they didn't even know they had an appointment. And I can do that. I can start from there, but oh my gosh, such a long journey. So these days, I know the family's working it by how the person enters the situation with me. And it just makes me so happy. Like, I'm so excited. Well, it makes my job easier for one, so Naturally, I'm excited. But also they get results a lot faster when that happens.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Um, I'm curious about this part with denial.
Mhm.
I think oftentimes, certainly parents or partners or whoever kind of see denial as this maybe resistance or opposition or kind of a choice. Denial is there's a purpose behind it for the person. And so I'm curious kind of your perspective on that, what denial provides for the person with addiction.
I mean, denial is just a defense mechanism. It's protective, and it's what we do, and we all do this in different aspects of when we're not ready to acknowledge something. When to acknowledge something would be really scary or mean, we have to take some huge steps or make some really hard decisions. Sometimes we just like to ignore it, pretend it's not there. Even in we're not always aware we're doing that, but we can refuse to see a problem. A family member can be in denial. Family member denial is worse than addict denial. Like, when family members get in denial, you're like, "Really?" You know what I mean? It's shocking almost, but, it's protective, and you can't it feels like it's like a blinder over someone's eyes, which it kind of is, and you can't just rip it off. What you have to do is you have to make someone safe enough to still, like, peek out a little at a time until they take it off.
Yeah. I even watched one of your videos earlier and I saw that when you're going to talk to someone, you don't make a big deal out of it. You don't say we need to have a talk because then their defenses come up. Can you unpack that for us, please?
Yeah, it's much like the blindfold issue. If you come at something very directly and in a scary way, like you're trying to make the person see it, so you're trying to magnify it for them, when I would actually minimize it for them because it makes it less scary and they're more likely to look at it. Like I might say, "Dude, everyone's in recovery these days. It's just the" you know, I'm like, "Who
Right.
doesn't have a therapist?" You make it less scary, you use humor, you use a casual tone of voice, and that will make them take their blindfold off, as opposed to when you come at the conversation really serious or really direct or trying to, like, show them evidence or send them articles about this is what it's doing to your lungs, like all the things. If you make it less threatening, they're more likely to see.
That's beautiful. Do you, what would just be an open message from you to addicts and to families of addicts?
The thing I wish people knew is that people get better from addiction. Of all the mental health things that you can have, this one is the most fixable. And not only do people get better every day, all the time, by the thousands and millions, but they're not just like back to their old selves. They become better human beings than they ever would have been. If you
Mm.
and your family survive this, you will come out the other side stronger, better, more self reflective, more humble, um, more smart in your relationships and your spirituality because you can't get on the other side of this without growing those muscles. It's kind of like you can't climb a mountain without getting, strong calves and thighs. It's like that. So you're going to come out and you're going to come out strong. You may not be glad it happened to you, but you will be glad of the person you became on the other side of it.
Beautiful. Thank you. They say that when a person does a lot of drugs or alcohol, it causes brain damage, it causes neurological damage. So let's say somebody's been heavily into one of these substances and then they recover. Is there any way, like, does it take 2 years, 3 years, or is that damage permanent? Or can they recover from the damage?
What the science shows is that the brain does recover from almost all of it. When it comes
Uh,
to methamphetamine, sometimes severe damage from something like methamphetamine can be a little bit harder to overcome, but it's not
Yeah.
so much about undoing brain damage. It's really a lot more about leveling out brain chemicals. And so it's about getting your brain to reset and come back to its normal homeostasis. It's not so
Okay.
much like I've like destroyed this piece of my brain. It's more just about leveling out so that your dopamine levels out, your serotonin levels out, your concentration comes back. So in most cases, I wouldn't call it brain damage. Very, very
Okay.
severe cases. And I've been doing this a long time and I have rarely seen it.
Okay. Okay. What I meant is like, I see some of these actors, directors on TV who we've seen in their younger days as great stars. Then they fall into the addiction pit. And then we see them after maybe 7 or 8 or 10 years of recovery. And you find that they have some funny twitches, their whole nature has changed. So those are what I was talking about.
I've honestly not seen a lot of that. I think I know what
Okay.
you're talking about, but in reality, I haven't seen a lot of permanent kind of things like that. More what I see is like acute withdrawal, post-acute withdrawal, and some stuff that can last, like 6 months or a year, but it's not like what you're describing. It's more like maybe difficulty concentrating, maybe motivation isn't where it should be, stuff like that. But it's a rare case where I see someone come out like permanently damaged like that. Not saying that it can't happen. I'm just saying it's not as common as you might think. It takes a lot. I mean, a lot for a long time. And I'm sure some of these rock stars and superstars probably did. No doubt, like, because they have more access. But it's amazing how the body and the mind can recover.
That's good to know. That's quite encouraging. Another thing I've seen is that when people have gone through an addiction, they come out and they go to Alcoholics Anonymous or any of these places. Even someone who stopped drinking 10, 20 years back introduces themselves as I'm an addict. So why is that? Does it mean it's permanent? It's not something you can get rid of, or why do they talk like that?
It's really kind of a controversial topic. A lot of people feel like it's not a good thing to call yourself an alcoholic or an addict. I get a lot of pushback because I still use those terms, which aren't even official clinical terms. But um, the part about it that's helpful is just to remind yourself that you have this problem. And the reason why that's important is because the thing about addiction is you constantly want to trick yourself into thinking this time will be different. It's like you want to like say, well, maybe I haven't used long enough and I'll have a different outcome. So it's not really like it is like once an addict, always an addict, but it's not. It's like can you be fixed? Yes, it sort of goes in remission. But if you reactivate it, it doesn't take. All you have to do is like consume that substance, do that thing one time, and it reactivates like muscle memory. And so that's the reason for continuing to say that in meetings. It's just a reminder of like, hey, don't mess with it. Bill Wilson, who wrote the big book of AA, they described it as an allergy, and that's probably one of the most accurate descriptions. Because it's like your body just starts to respond to it differently, and then you have this allergic reaction immediately, like if you're allergic to nuts or fish or something like that. And so it's just to remind yourself, I just have this allergy. It's the way I explain it to my client. It doesn't mean that it's always affecting me. It just means I have to stay away from this one thing. Otherwise, I have a bad reaction. That's the way I see it.
Thank you. Thank you. That was a question in my head for a few years.
Yeah, and speaking of like AA, I'm curious what your thoughts are with the role of spirituality in recovery. Is that something that you incorporate? Do you find it's helpful, not helpful?
I am a big fan of AA and all the 12 steps, but I don't think it's the only way. I like all the ways. I like to say I'm non-denominational recovery. Well, I like it all, whatever works. Some people are turned off by the religious aspect, and if that's the case, that's fine. I do think spirituality is important because what happens to you as you become addicted is you really do become spiritually sick, as in you're full of shame, you lose your sense of meaning and purpose, you lose your motivation, your desire, you lose everything inside. And so it is a spiritual process to coming back to, what is my purpose here on earth? And that can be religious or whatever that is, but it is a spiritual illness that does need some of that. It doesn't have to be religious, but there is some bigger piece there that people have to close that gap to get better. You guys are so
Just
cute. Y'all just look at each other. You're so cute.
So I wanted to get your take on ADHD and addiction. I know there's a strong correlation between the two, and certainly there's dopamine seeking behavior. So what have you seen in your work, and how do you work with ADHD?
I personally feel like it's two sides of the same coin. They're both issues related to dopamine, so they're just different symptoms related to the same sort of core issue. And I don't know exactly what the research says. I can tell you, in my opinion, it feels like probably somewhere between 80 and 90 something percent of the people I see that have addiction also have ADD or ADHD. And you can tell that even just from getting their histories, not just from the behaviors that they have while they're addicted, but when you listen to their whole histories, you can see and feel that it's just been there. Like, some of them know it, and they'll tell you, "I was diagnosed at this age." But even the ones that weren't diagnosed, when you ask them the right questions, you can see that it was there all along. Um,
Mhm.
and a lot of people use the term addictive personality. I think that is ADD, because when people use that term, they're like, "Oh my gosh, this person just does everything excessively. You give them anything, they'll get out of control." I'm like, "That's an ADD." Because I think they should change the name of it from attention deficit to attention inconsistent. Because I have it. And it's not that you have a deficit of it, you have an inconsistency of it. Like, some things I can't think about at all, like mail. If you I cannot read mail. It feels like, and I've had a lot of education, but my brain just was like, "What does this say? This is dumb. What?" And I'm gonna have to get to myself, "What? You read this," or my office manager. Other things I can think about endlessly and deeply and go into the vortex and can't stop thinking about. So it's inconsistent. Yeah.
How much do you find treatment for ADHD to be an important part of recovery? I know that there was a time when stimulants oftentimes weren't prescribed for people if they had a history of addiction or an addiction. And then it seems like that has really shifted course, that treating the underlying ADHD is a really important part of addiction recovery. What have you seen? What are your thoughts on that?
I don't have a hard and fast rule other than if someone's addiction is stimulants, then I wouldn't go that route, even if they did have ADHD. If their addiction is something else, like alcohol or just pain pills or something else, then I would say, okay, let's try that if the person wants to try that, but let's keep our eye on it. Because if you have
Yeah.
ADHD, the chances that you can get addicted to things is just high in general, like anything. But um to be really honest, like, in all of my years, you know how many people I've seen addicted to amphetamine? Less than 5.
Mhm.
People get
Really?
scared. I'm like, I know it's like
Wow.
the highest schedule, and I'm sure people do get addicted. I think people maybe abuse amphetamines, like, in college, but as far as
Mm.
people coming to see me that is the issue, I've seen it, but not that many times, and so
Interesting.
I'm not as scared of it as some people are. On the other side of that coin, even if you have it, I don't think you have to medicate it, because some people they just don't like it. They don't like the way it makes them feel. They don't wanna take medicine. I think it's important to understand your operating system and
Mhm.
understand what the gifts of that are, and then I just try to help people see how having ADHD is kind of a gift and a vice all at the same time, and just to sort of sculpt your life in a way that works with who you are instead of against who you are. Not about it's
Mhm.
not about trying to change that operating system. It's just about directing it or understanding it and make life work
Yeah.
for you.
Yeah, for sure. What are some of the traits of people with ADHD that you see as strengths in recovery?
I like to say, "Listen, you just have a good obsessor. You're just obsessors on the wrong thing. Let's just put it on something else that makes you feel proud of yourself instead of mad at yourself." Like, let's make good use
Yeah.
of your obsessor. You're, like, nonstop, "I'm not gonna stop till I get what I want" tendencies. And I think that works, and I think maybe that's why I like to see, like, business people and real type A ADHD type people, because they can quite easily shift that over, like, "Let's put that towards this," and they'll be like, I do like that," and it does work.
Yeah. What if some are there any things that you've seen that people where they've really succeeded with that? Just any stories that you have from your work?
Yeah, I have a client, and she's actually gonna tell her story on my channel soon, but she had, a gambling addiction, and she's a physician, and so she decided she has her own practice. She decided she was gonna make YouTube videos, and I said, "That is perfect because that's all about numbers and calculating the system and strategy." And she says how that worked for her perfectly. It's like her new obsession, but it's a game you can win, whereas the other games
Mm,
you can't win. And so it's just a redirection.
yeah.
That's powerful.
Definitely.
That's very powerful.
So I'm also curious, just for you personally. So you have you still coach. You were a counselor, then a coach, and then opened up into this podcast. So what was your journey with that transition?
Well, when I first started the YouTube channel, it really just kinda came because I felt like I say the same 15 things to clients, all day long, and then they would always say, like, "I wish I had this on recording." And I thought, "I guess I could record that." Like, and then, I just, like, put it on YouTube because then I knew anybody could click it, they could access it easily or whatever for free. I wasn't trying to do YouTube. I was just created, like, some of my educational things, like the brain science and some of the things I had to say all the time. Put it on there. That's the way the idea got started. But then it just sort of grew into my own ADHD obsessive thing. And I was like, "Oh, this is like a whole world in here." And then I would, like, learn about it, and then more and more. It's a vortex for sure. And so that's the start of it.
How do you see the field of addiction recovery and family coaching evolving over the next decade or so?
I mean, I feel like it's moving a lot more to flexibility. I feel like old school was like, there's one way to do it. There's only one way to do it. If you don't do it this way, you're not really in recovery. You're going to relapse. And I just feel like it's opening up to more and more and more channels and avenues for how to help people, which I think is a very good thing. Whether it's medicine, whether it's religion, whether it's coaching, there's just so many pathways now.
So if a family feels utterly hopeless, what's the one message you'd want to leave with them?
That first of all, this isn't hopeless. Even if someone's severely addicted, it's really I see people come out of it at every stage of it. So in my mind, if you're still alive, you're still in the game. That's the way that I see it. And even if the situation that you're dealing with doesn't turn around as much as you hope, you can still change your interaction with that person. You can have a better dynamic. You can sort of deal with the situation in a way that makes you feel better and wholehearted. How did you
So
guys
the
become podcasters? What's your story?
Uh, okay, it's a couple of things. I had written a book. I love writing, so I've written for many years, and then I wrote this one book in 2012, which turned into a bestseller. And after that,
What's it called? You
I,
gotta tell us what it's called.
it's called Pride of Lions.
Okay.
It's a spiritual book, but the story is a war story. And it just hit a chord. It did very, very well. It got signed up for a movie, but the movie didn't happen because COVID hit the producers' finances and they couldn't, war movies are expensive to make.
Uh-huh.
But I wrote two more stories after that and just didn't see them through because I had this thought in my head constantly that when you release a book, it is usually the end of your process. You think of a lot of things, you research, you plan, and then you put out the book.
Uh-huh.
And that's the end of your process. But by the time the book is out, or maybe a few years later, you as a person have also evolved and you may not still think the same.
Uh-huh.
So I had this thought in my head saying, what can we do wherein we involve our audience with the process itself and they can evolve with us rather than just giving them the end of a process and then we've changed by then.
Uh-huh.
The podcast just made sense. And then when we got married, we decided that we should do something together, work on something that we are both passionate about. And podcast just made sense. We said, why not? And philosophy is one of our common biggest passions. I've been running philosophy salons on the island for a few years now, participating in them, running them as a moderator. I just love philosophy. I love discussions. I also feel that today's world that we live in is so divided that if someone doesn't agree with you, then you just view them as evil. Whereas if we can have, even twin siblings grow up as two different personalities, even if they look the same.
Mm-hmm.
Why are we shocked that someone doesn't think like us?
Right? Yeah.
To be able to provide a safe space where you can say what you want and not get attacked for it, and you can think and share your thoughts. So we have a few rules, of course. We are extremely respectful. We don't attack anyone. We don't debate. We share our ideas. And I think it's the need of the hour. It's what society needs, a place where people can just openly share what they think respectfully and just receive others' ideas respectfully. In the years that I've done this philosophy salons that I've conducted, there are times when I've gone into a conversation thinking that I know everything that I need to know.
Mm-hmm.
And then someone just says something, and I realize I've been schooled, I've been humbled. And that's a beautiful feeling because you just go, oh, I didn't think of that.
Mm-hmm.
And it still happens to me. There's some episodes we just do, and I go in thinking, yes, this is the point of view. I've got this crack.
Mm-hmm.
And halfway through, someone says something, and I just go, oh my God, I didn't think of that. And I think it's okay to be like that. It's okay to change your mind. It's okay to evolve.
I love those light bulb moments. It feels like your whole universe shifts. It's like cool. Yeah. I love that you're giving a place for people to have deeper conversation. Because I feel like there's a lack of that and people really crave that. Especially with men, because I see a lot of men and yeah, they have friends, but they don't have any real dialogue, past sports or work or something like that. And they crave that. And
Yeah.
people who are in recovery actually get really good at having deeper, more authentic conversations. And they look for that. They want more from their relationships after they've experienced that. And I think it's just great that it's out there because it's just hard for people to find, especially in a safe place.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Appreciate it. And also being autistic, I'm more or less incapable of small talk. She has to do all the small talk because I just shut down, and I'm happy to jump into a deep topic. But when it comes to social talk, I'm just shut. I don't know how to get around it. So these conversations I find hugely stimulating and educative. And we just had an episode 3 days ago wherein there were people talking on both sides. And every time someone spoke, I just went, wow, he's right. And then I go, wow, she's right. And I realize I agree with both, and they don't agree with each other. But I agree with both of them. And that's humbling for me. It's just education, it's like being schooled.
Yeah.
And I love that too.
Yeah, rarely are things black and white. You can have two people be right and be on opposing sides. Yeah. You got to be able to see all those shades of gray. And I hate small talk too. I think most people hate small talk. I can do it, but I don't like it.
Thank you. That helps. I always feel like, oh, I don't know what to say.
Well, I get paid to talk to people, and I can stand up on a stage and talk easier than I can be at a baby shower or, do the whole mingling thing. Oh, it feels like torture.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That I can relate to. I've been talking on stage all my life, but ask me to get into a basic social conversation and shut. Crazy.
You got a good wingman.
Oh,
Guys.
no, she's awesome. Awesome. She handles social life. She softens the stuff I sometimes write or I say. Before I say it, I check with her, and she says, "Oh no, that's too blunt. That's too strong," and she softens me up a lot. Yeah.
Y'all just look at each other so lovingly. I love it. It makes me happy to see. You just look at each other's eyes, and it's so sweet.
She's awesome. Just awesome.
Yeah.
I always wonder where she's been all my life, and I'm just grateful she's here now.
Same. I do have just two more questions. Okay. In families struggling with addiction, it's common for the person with the addiction to become the identified patient or the so-called black sheep.
Hmm.
And they end up carrying most of the blame. And families oftentimes don't do this on purpose. I know it comes from more pain or desperation. But when that pattern takes hold, how can families begin to see the whole system more clearly in a way that's free of blame or shame?
Well, one of the best ways to get your loved one who may be struggling with addiction to have a problem is to say something like, "Look, I know this isn't the only issue. I have issues too. Like, we should both go work on it." It's actually opens up someone's mind to being a lot more receptive because a lot of their defensiveness, what they're thinking in their head is like, "You blame everything on my drinking, and that's not the only problem." And that's what they're so if you'll just own that, even if you don't believe it, if you'll at least just own it and be receptive if you approach it that way. And you can even say, "Maybe I'm approaching this wrong. I know some of the things I'm doing is not helpful either. Like, let's figure this out together." It will make the other person a lot more open-minded to getting some help rather than if you try to back them in a corner.
That's a powerful tip.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like that.
And then for those who would like to follow your work or connect with you, what's the best way to reach you?
The best place to find me is on YouTube, and the channel is called Put the Shovel Down. And I know that's a weird title, but it means you hit your bottom when you put the shovel down. You don't have to keep digging. You can stop at any point. You don't have to lose everything and burn all your bridges. Put the shovel down.
Love that. And just one question from my side is, if someone was to look at Amber Hollingsworth,
Huh?
what are the solutions that Amber provides that someone can come to you for?
The main thing that I do these days is I coach and consult family members who have a loved one in denial. Like, how do I move someone from denial into action? And then I do still coach. I don't do a lot of it, but I still coach people who have addictions. And I use a strengths-based approach, meaning I'm looking for what's right with you and not what's wrong with you. And I'm just looking to sort of redirect the energy. My goal isn't to make you feel like you're seeing me because I'm not the principal or the probation officer. I really see myself as your ally to get you out of a mess if you need out of a mess. I call myself a defensive. So I get people out of messes. That's what I do. I have your back.
Does someone have to be in South Carolina to come to you, or can they do it from anywhere?
You can do it from anywhere. That's why we switched from counseling to coaching and consulting, because we can do that virtually from anywhere. So almost all of my sessions these days are over Zoom. I still have a few people who come into the office, but it's way more virtual these days.
I see that. That's super helpful. I'm sure people can reach out to you on your website.
Mhm.
Thank you for taking so much time out and being so patient with us and explaining things that will be so useful and so powerful to our audience as well. Thank you again, Amber. It's been amazing.
Yeah, thank you guys.